Indeterminate thing. I think we might be live. We're live on the internet. Hello, everybody. Once again, this is. I'm going to just look at this magic trick. Look at that. Now I'm looking into the audio. There we go. I'm looking at people. That feels better. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all well. My name is William Owen. My YouTube channel is Inspire Reflection. And today is another one of our little Street Epistemology call-in shows. And I'm joined by the immutable Chucky from I Hear You, and Janosch. I got my Germans. There are two Germans and they're basically the same person.
Yeah, I'm the other guy. Yeah,
Janosch with Dr. Prometheus. Is that your Twitter handle, I believe, right?
That is Dirt Prometheus. Yeah, it's my Twitter handle. I don't have a YouTube channel yet, but stay tuned. There might be news soon.
Whoa, I tell you what, I'm going to just stay here and wait.
Okay, yeah, let's do that for the show. That sounds like a good idea.
Any news? No news yet?
Not yet. No,
okay.
No news yet.
Keep us posted.
Yeah. How's it going, everybody?
Yeah. So one thing to say is that there's a link to the call-in component of this show is going to be in the top of the YouTube channel. Is it on Reddit as well? I forget. And Facebook, I think it's pinned and posted all over the places. So
I didn't put this on Reddit this week.
Okay. Yeah. It looks like we're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, I guess. So I guess you'll find the link to join us on those platforms somewhere. So please do have a look. I'm not entirely sure where they are. But yes, feel free to join us if you've got any questions or comments, things you'd like to talk about us in the world of street epistemology. But until then, Janosch, you've got some news, right?
And also, if you want to call in with a claim, we'd be happy to do live SE.
Yes, that too.
Yeah. So we have a German language practice group for street epistemology. We meet up every Sunday at 8 p.m. German time. And also there's a smaller group usually on Wednesdays. But tomorrow, this Sunday, we will be joined by Anthony Magnabosco, and we will have the opportunity to ask him some questions about SE and talk to him. So if there are any German speakers watching this right now, feel free to join.
How good is Anthony's German? Is it good? Does he?
Actually, I don't know exactly. I've never heard him speak German, but I think he understands a little.
Gonna find out.
Yeah. we'll just speak German the entire time. Yeah. No. So if by the way, that is a good thing that maybe I should add. If there are people who are not comfortable speaking English or who are not that fluent, you can still, of course, join and listen. And if you have a question, you can just give us the question and we will ask it in English if you're more comfortable with that. And
I'm going to put a link to the Street Epistemology Discord in the YouTube chat. So you can join that if you're not already on it.
This is a lovely synergy we've got going on here. This is great. Everybody's just doing their thing. I love it. It's so good. So Janosch, you were saying earlier, just before we started, you've wandered out into the streets of Germany and accosted strangers. How was it for you?
That's right. Yeah. I've tried it before years ago, but not really. Like I only had a GoPro strapped to my chest.
This was a street epistemology interview context. I want to just add that in, seeing as you went.
That might be relevant. How sure are you about that, William?
I'm increasingly less so. Yeah.
Yeah. But that didn't really go well. I had like one or two chats, but they weren't that interesting. But yeah, now I've got all my gear. I've got a table like Reed does, and two chairs, and my recording equipment. And well, I believe that it's different to do it in Germany because there is a different mentality in Germany than at least in the United States, where I think in the US people are more open to when someone approaches you and just starts a conversation, you're more open to like seeing where that goes, and you're just open and friendly. And in Germany, usually when you talk to someone, it's because you want something. So when you talk to someone, like I was in the park, if you talk to someone in the park, usually it's, hey, can I borrow something from you? Or do you have a Frisbee? I forgot mine, or something like that. So, and people are usually a little bit like skeptical and don't really know why are you talking to me? So
I think there's an interesting component of that, isn't it, where somebody's asking for something directly so that people understand how to conclude the transaction, like how they can resolve it. And I think some countries are more comfortable having an open transaction and just sort of seeing where something leads. But
there's this theory of communication involving schemas, and so like when you go into a restaurant, you know the script, you know the person's going to say, here's your table, and then you say, can I see a menu? And then you're supposed to pick what you want to eat, and like that, you kind of know where it goes. And as soon as something is off in that script, you go, whoa, what's going on? This isn't what I expected.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So there you are, table and chair, the full Monty. And how did you entice your? I wanted to say victims, but I won't. How did you entice your conversation partners?
Well, I have a little poster, like a poster stand, standing next to a little footpath through the park, and sometimes people will pass it and stop and read. And when they start reading, I will usually slowly approach them and see if
comes
they're
down.
Yeah. And then see, like, tell them, ask them if they have any questions, explain it to them.
So what does your poster say?
Yeah, right.
What's that?
What does your poster say?
Right. My poster says, what do you believe? And it has a few, like 3 examples on each side. There's 2 sides, and there's two different sides, and there's 3 on each side. There's 3 examples, and it's like one is like there are, and then a bracket, exactly 2 or more than 2 closing bracket genders, or genders, or climate change is bracket not closing bracket real. So it's always both statements, both opposites. And that, I think that might be something that people need a moment to understand. What is that about? And
it was confusing just listening to it, and I knew what you were going for.
Right, yeah. So yeah, that's what the poster says, and then I will usually approach them, and they will ask, "What's this about?" And I'll explain to them it's a conversational technique.
Why are you here? Where is your permit? Are you authorized to do this?
So far, I haven't had anyone ask me about a permit.
They didn't want to see your papers?
No. Jesus Christ.
Not yet, William.
This is going to be a dark show.
My apologies. It sounds cool. I mean, honestly, it takes a hell of a lot of courage, I think, to go out there and try and do this, because it is it's an awkward thing. People aren't used to it, so they're not sure how to interact. They're not sure, that they've got no idea. And I think people are generally suspicious everywhere you go about people wanting to come up and talk to you about something. And it's slightly a shame that we have this, but it certainly is a present problem that you have to overcome if you're going to do street epistemology, actually in the street, right?
You've done plenty of it on the Discord. How do you feel like it's different doing it in person?
I mean, on Discord, it's a group of people. We all know each other. Usually, sometimes there's someone new, but it's a practice situation. Doing it in person and also doing it with strangers in the park is very different. And sometimes people won't even, like with this one guy, I tried to ask for a claim, something that he believes is true. And at first he didn't have something. I have a list of examples what they could pick, different areas of life, like religion or politics or whatever. And he picked something health related. And I said, okay, so is there a claim that you believe is true? And he said, yeah, definitely. Because, I've experienced it. And then he started telling me about his experience, but he never told me the claim.
Right.
He just said, something health related, something healing. Yeah, healing. Oh, okay. Do you have a claim about? Yeah,
That's so
I do
interesting.
believe that it's true because, and then he started talking. So
I
yeah,
almost feel like people just aren't people aren't used to talking about their beliefs, and so it's like you
Yeah.
just think, well, everyone shares my beliefs, so I don't need to talk. I don't need to name it. Yeah.
Maybe was it? I mean, this sounds a bit like what Dave at Sound Epistemology was trying with the hidden claim position. Did you find that there was any traction you could gain from his hidden, unintentionally claim?
Well, I tried to get to a claim, and we did get to a claim. Still a little bit vague, but there was a claim that we talked about. But yeah, like it's something that at first I was a little bit confused. Like how do we now get to identifying the claim? How do we get to that step, right? So, but yeah, I've had a few good talks, so. And some of them are recorded, so that may or may not have something to do with a potential YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah. It looks like John from Quality Questions says, people often find my cameras and mics intimidating, especially older folks. Did you run into any problems like getting consent to record or anything like that?
Actually, I printed out a form.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because in Germany, people are really care about privacy and our privacy laws. And I wanted to make sure that everything is watertight. So I would usually bring that up a little bit later when they had already consented, and then I would explain, okay, so in order to be on the safe side, blah, 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 could you please read?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, read that and just sign if that's okay. And you can always ask me to remove the content later, because our law says that you can.
Do they have to agree to give you the rights to the movie adaptation of the conversation, or
can we not talk about that? That's on a little like
still negotiating with Tom Cruise.
Print. It's in the fine print.
Tom Cruise is playing Janosch. It's been a long day, guys. So yeah, there is a sort of weird optic, isn't there, with like the fact that you've got GoPros strapped to sort of every sort of flat surface of you, and you're kind of doing the least extreme sport you could imagine, but it certainly creates an optic.
Yeah. Well, I don't do that anymore. I now have a tripod with a camera in.
And that's what I was going to ask. Yeah. So I'm wondering whether, like, I know Anthony has spoken in the past. I don't know if he still believes it, but he's spoken in the past about it being beneficial that it's a stand-up conversation, that there's something about the temporariness of it, and also your ability to sort of observe body language and discomfort a little bit more easily when people are standing versus sort of partially hidden by a desk. Now you've had some experience of both. Did you find the desk dynamic? I mean, you're obviously a bit more experienced and sort of different person slightly, but did you find anything that you think you noticed about the difference between the desk dynamic versus the standing up dynamic?
I think the biggest difference was that back when I did it standing up with the GoPro strapped to my chest, I found it a lot harder to approach people and ask them if they were interested in having this kind of conversation. So I was still a little bit more shy, and now
it feels more like you're the hunter versus they're coming to you, right?
Yeah, but I mean, still, now last time I was in the park for like, I think like 1.5 or 2 hours, no one was interested. I had no one who wanted to have a conversation. So I started going to groups of people and telling them what I was doing, and that's interesting. There's usually a group dynamic. There's usually some people in the group who will say, oh, that sounds like something that you would want to do, and they point to someone because they have someone in the group who they know he's into that.
Always easier to volunteer somebody else for things.
Right. And that sometimes that works. So but yeah, so I approach people now more than I used to, and I don't know if, of course, it changes the dynamic somewhat, but I couldn't really tell you what it is, what's different.
Yeah, Reed's presentation style definitely. It's the optic is so completely different from sort of the GoPro strapped and clipboard and the sort of, you know, whereas readers sat there with the table and the banners, and it looks more like an event, like a like
Right,
something is happening.
Yeah. A booth at a fair,
rather than just some guy with cameras trying to get you into an ambiguous conversation. And I think that there's a but I can see Anthony's point. Like, I do think like the observation of body language, I've definitely noticed watching his videos, I found observing the body language much more interesting in his videos because of the sort of standing up. But yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if there's a you know, a thing there. Chucky, have you've done most of your conversations, I think, like I have, online, right?
Yeah, because I'm so interested in talking to friends and family. Like, I've either done them on the phone or over Zoom or whatever. None of this going into the park to random stranger stuff. And you know, it's obviously easier to get somebody to talk to, but on the other hand, it's weirder to record. Like, there's immediately suspicion that goes up. Why do you want to record a conversation with me? Like, what's going on there?
With some people, yes, but usually when I explain, well, I've been studying and I've been practicing this conversational technique, and I want to, first of all, I want to be able to rewatch it and see how I did and see where I can improve. And second, I want to show that to people so that they can learn the technique as well. That usually they understand that. And then of course there's people who will go, I'll have a conversation but not on camera.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
I've been explaining that I want to demonstrate that people can have kind conversations about contentious topics. And like, you can go to my YouTube channel and see me talk about gun control or whatever, and like, it's not an argument.
That's one of the hardest things I found when I was trying to start out with the YouTube channel, was like having no videos to demonstrate that I was honestly doing this. And,
there's a bit of a catch-22. Yeah,
there is a really strong problem of bootstrapping this stuff, and I think I've slightly cheated it by choosing to interview people within the community, and as well as this, so they get the sense of the kinds of conversation I'm having. So it's been quite useful, but it is a difficult bootstrapping problem. But yeah, I worry that a little bit that the conversations that might be held over Zoom and in these calls, I wonder if people might not forget that they are being recorded. I mean, because I think
eventually, they do.
Yeah, and I wonder if I don't. Yeah, have you ever sent people the video before they're publishing it?
Oh, I always do. So my agreement is that I'll send you the link, and then you can choose whether you want it to be made public or not.
Yeah,
and I get the same. I get the same veto power.
Yeah, I always ask people at the end if they're okay with it, and I worry a little bit that might mean that they felt good at the end, but maybe they'd forgotten something about a third of the way through where they maybe said something they weren't comfortable with, and
Up until now, that's been my reasoning. But I've found that the problem is some people have such busy lives that they can't take the time to watch it through, and then so that I just keep waiting, and it's been weeks. I'd really like to put this video out. Do you mind like giving me the go ahead? So I'm probably just gonna start asking people after the conversation.
If I haven't heard from you until that day, I'm gonna assume that you're okay with it.
Yeah.
It's going to be released to all of the major news out. No, it's a difficult thing. I think how to. I feel like I've been trying to do that. I've been working on it. I need to get back to it, but I've been working on a short, like literally 2-minute video that tries to explain the concepts of SE as in friendly and open terms as possible. And I think that the lack of that is something that I suffer from. I want to be able to send something very, very short to somebody that, and it's hard to be sincere without sounding like you're trying to trick somebody into doing, like it's a scheme. And it's a problem with communication in general, I think, in today's day and age, that almost if you produce something that's trying to persuade somebody of something, like it sounds identical to like somebody trying to honestly explain it, because they've gotten good at making those two things look the same.
Right.
And And so it's really hard to just try to be open and friendly and convey some information very quickly without trying to sound like this is a well-rehearsed pitch. It's a routine, and that kind of echoes, I think. I always struggle with the introduction. Hi, I have this hobby that I do this thing called street epistemology, and you're aware that they're aware that this is already a bit weird, and you're like, why are you telling me about your hobby? And so you try and explain it as quickly. And I thought, by the way, John, Quality Questions has done a really good job of this in a good number of his videos, and I keep trying to remember. I'm going to learn John's patter for this because it's very neat. And importantly, he references knowledge. He talks about knowledge quite often in his introductory speech, which I like because I seem to always forget that, despite epistemology being right in there. I talk about why people believe what they believe quite often, but that's not the same as knowledge. And I think that's, or at least it's subtly different. And I think it's kind of neat how well John does with this. Do you guys have any particular phraseologies that you like to use in your introduction, your pitch?
I like to say I've noticed these last couple of years people are becoming increasingly tribal, and I want to break through so that people can talk to other tribes.
Yeah, the problem with people that say that, though, is they don't normally mean it, though. What they normally mean is, I want to be more effective at selling you what I believe. That's
perhaps,
what people very often, I think, hear.
Ultimately, in this age of advertising and all this stuff, like, it's hard to know whether anybody's being sincere.
If anybody in chat has got any recommendations for opening lines to explore or represent SE, I think that would be a great thing to explore. I'd love to hear what people's opening pitches to strangers would be to explain what street epistemology is and how the interviews work. I think that'd be very useful.
Or if you have any other experiences from other countries where you think that the culture in that country affects the way that you approach people, or that people react when you approach them. Also, feel free to call in.
Feel free to call in. I was just going to ask you about that, Janosch, because they say that comedy is not easy in Germany because in the German language, the kind of premise comes at the beginning, or the sort of the noun comes at the beginning. So you can't sort of it's not so easy to long tease the joke to sort of imply that it might be something and suddenly switch it in for the thing you're talking about and reveal the humor of the situation. In Germany, it's sort of the subject comes right at the beginning, and then you sort of explain what had happened. And so comedy is not so apparently as easy in German. I'm wondering whether there's a correlation there with is how do you feel about SE in German versus SE in English?
Good question. Well, first of all, there is some freedom in switching around the different parts of the sentence in German. I don't know if there is a fundamental difference in doing SE in German in general. There are some things that are different, like, for example, we don't have the distinction between belief and faith. So people usually don't bring up faith as a reason for believing something, because that would, in German, that's both the word Glaube, and that would be like, I believe it because of belief. Like that's what it would sound like. It's a
little more obvious there's a problem with that.
Yeah. But yeah, in general, I don't know. Most principles of SE work the same way. I'd say the outsider test of, it's called the outsider test of faith, but really it's just an outsider test, right? You can do it with pretty much anything.
You can.
So yeah, I don't know if there is a fundamental difference because of the languages.
That's awesome. So I see we have a caller.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
Let me invite you to the Shane the Skeptic.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh. Hi, Shane.
Well, that was brief, but still, thanks for calling in.
Well, this is working beautifully. Honestly, Shane, as far as I can tell, you've been added to the call, but for some reason, it's just a completely black screen.
It works for me. Maybe
and I can't hear anybody now.
Okay, that's definitely just his end, because I could still see you two. I can still see all three of you.
Yeah, we can see and hear you, but William has having problems.
Suppose he can't.
Yeah, it's weird that happened right when I hopped in though.
Okay, I can hear you guys and see you guys now. Hi, Shane.
Okay, cool.
Did I wig out for you guys because you guys all froze up?
No, your screen was like loaded the whole time. So
weird.
That was
so
weird.
sorry.
Yeah, your audio was still on and everything. Like we still heard you. So
a little bit of technical difficulties, but
right.
All right, welcome, Shane.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I was hesitant to call in because I didn't know if my topic would really was like the kind of thing you were looking for, because I figured you're probably, because I used to do SE, so like I know the types of claims that you look for to kind of do SE on. But I think it was Chucky who made the recommendation, because I asked a question in the live chat about you guys' thoughts on coherentism versus foundationalism in epistemology. And if you were aware of what those were, or what your thoughts on that topic.
So can you tell us what those long words mean?
Sure. So in epistemology, I'll just give you the best explanations that I've read about. I'm a huge epistemology nerd, so I've found the most simplified versions that I could. So a foundationalist epistemology would be an epistemology. Think of a upside down pyramid, in which the very bottom of the pyramid, the blocks at the very bottom of this pyramid, would be your foundational beliefs or your basic beliefs. And those beliefs would support some further beliefs. So for example, if you had an answering machine, this is from a 2006 textbook, so that's why there's answering machines in this example. If you had an answering machine, you might see that the answering machine is blinking, and your belief that the red light is blinking forms your belief that you have a message. So one belief, the belief that the light is blinking, is more basic than the other, that you have a new message. So in a foundationalist epistemology, your strongest beliefs would rest at the bottom of this upside down pyramid, and then on top you would have your other beliefs, which were supported by those ones, right? And then a coherentist epistemology is sort of like, think of a crossword puzzle, and the way in which anytime you fill out a crossword puzzle, anytime you get one word, you become further justified in figuring out what the other words are. That's how epistemology, coherentist epistemology, works with belief. Any one belief that you have further supports some other belief that you have, because your beliefs, the idea is that the coherence of your beliefs is what confers justification. And in my opinion, I think that SE kind of assumes a foundationalist epistemology, which is fine for me because I'm a foundationalist. But yeah, I was interested in what you guys would think about how each of those epistemologies would tie into SE.
That's an interesting question. I'm not as familiar with those terms as I think I perhaps should be, on those ideas, but your explanations were really good, so I appreciate that. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
My first reaction to that would be, why would it not be both? Why would people's views not be supported by both of those premises, those ideas? So
I don't think that there's anything necessarily inconsistent with being a coherentist and doing SE. I just feel like if you do SE, normally you ask the person, some claim, some belief, right? And then you start asking them why it is that they believe this. And it seems like as you ask question after question after question, normally what you're doing is trying to find the very foundation of this belief. But I once I start saying it out loud, I could see how you could look at the questions as, sort of filling out the crossword puzzle and seeing if they become justified in what they think, if everything that they think is coherent together.
I feel like some conversations you wind up going really deep and you realize, actually, this is a conversation about values, for example, and that the underlying value is X and not Y. But sometimes you just realize, well, this belief is actually just being propped up by everything else that's in my life, and I feel like that's foundationalist versus coherentist. Is that the correct word?
Coherentist. Yeah. So for me personally, like, I do think coherence plays a role in justification of beliefs. but I'm still a foundationalist because I think that, you know, like in order to believe that we are talking right now, I have to believe that my computer is on. Like my belief that we're talking is dependent on my belief that my computer's on. You know, my belief that my computer is on is dependent on my belief that computers exist, you know, and then of course you have like so forth and so forth. And I guess, you know, I guess like either epistemology that you have, you could still do SE, but I think you probably, from putting consideration into the two different epistemologies, I don't know, I feel like you could become more informed about how you approach the conversation.
Can I ask you a question to test this idea?
Yeah.
Can I use, so I heard you say that your foundational belief is that your computer is on, and then from that, your sort of higher level belief is that we're having a conversation. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. I would be reluctant to call that the foundational, but
more foundational?
More foundational, yeah. So
Yeah.
like what you're saying, I agree with, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Can we use the fact that you are seeing our pictures as evidence for the fact that your computer's on?
Yes.
So maybe it goes both ways.
Yeah, this is definitely that's definitely.
I guess that example that's a good point to make about that example. Yeah. Okay, that's a pretty good point.
But I think there are probably other examples where we could probably agree that there are more foundational beliefs underlying other beliefs. Like, for example, people who call themselves pro-life, who are against abortion. Sometimes the reason for that is they believe in a soul, and the reason why they believe in a soul is
Right.
that they believe in the Bible and in a Christian God. So
Right.
usually, if all of that wasn't there, maybe they wouldn't believe that abortion was always wrong because they wouldn't believe in a soul.
Yeah, Peter in chat says this is basically the same thing. You keep asking, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? And you get down to foundational beliefs. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you go in a circle, and I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that either.
So one of the things I think is really important, I talk to people sometimes about this idea of a tree. So people's beliefs are like a tree, and they definitely have they frequently will have a trunk. And sometimes when you're talking to people in a street epistemology conversation, they'll start throwing all kinds of things. They'll assert that the evidence and their reason for believing what they believe is a sort of huge, complicated web of ideas. And they'll talk about the sort of stories and the nature of those stories and the interplay between those stories. I sort of talk about it sometimes like it's the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. Like, it seems convincing because it's so coherent within their world, in their mind.
Right.
They feel that that's the reason. And when I talk to somebody who's doing that, I am doing that exact thing where I keep trying to get to a more foundational belief because I'm looking
Right.
to get to the trunk. And I think a lot of the time when people are doing street epistemology and they're not used to talking to people who are kind of responding in this way, they do what I call whacking away at the branches. They're just swatting away one branch, but none of these branches are really important. What you need to do is to get to the sort of the core belief that props up all of those branches so that you can really actually understand that foundation.
Right.
And one of the key questions, I think, in street epistemology that we ask to try to do that is saying, would you change your mind if you were to discover that this piece of information wasn't true? And if they say no, then you can just move on.
Right.
Because that's not really holding the view up, right? And so you can test whether you're sort of...
Although, so on one hand, I agree with that, but I also think that sometimes a belief could have more than one supporting block. We can call beliefs blocks in the metaphor for the pyramid, right? So sometimes somebody might have a belief and you ask them why they believe this. And suppose there are 3 reasons why they believe this, right? And you ask them why they believe this, and they cite one of these reasons. You might get them to realize, maybe this reason isn't reliable, or if you changed your mind on this, if this wasn't true, would you still believe it? And that person might very well say, yeah, I would still believe it even if that wasn't true. And I think that shows that isn't their sole foundation, but it doesn't show that they don't have any further justification. It just shows that that's not a justification for it.
Right.
And if you get them to realize that, then I do think you help get them a step away from, whatever that supported belief is.
Well, it's oftentimes it's explained as this question helps you determine whether or not it's actually the real reason why they believe it. But what if it's, like you said, you have 3 blocks holding this up,
Right?
and if either of those 3 falls away, the other 2 are still there.
Right.
Only if all 3 of them are not supporting that belief anymore, then they will start doubting the belief.
Yeah.
So, and they could be more or less equally important, or at least all important reasons, but they would still say, if that reason wasn't there, if you still believe it, they would say, yes, it wouldn't change my belief.
Yeah, because if you were to ask me, for example, like why I believe that climate change exists and is increased by human activity, one of the first things I would probably cite would be the fact that 98% of scientists who study climate change say that that it's real. But if you were to ask me, what if it wasn't 98%? What if it was 60%? Right? You then I would say I would reconsider it, but no, I would still believe that climate change is real and caused by human activity, and that's because I have an understanding of the process in which it happens. Right?
Yeah. So part of this, I think, is inferring unintentionally that we are quite binary. We either believe something or we don't, and I don't think that's how people are at all. So in your example, Janosch, of the 3 sort of trunk positions, right? I think even if all 3 of those were heavy influences on your confidence for believing a certain thing, you removing one of them certainly couldn't leave the person as confident as they were previously. I don't think people really do binarily.
Yeah, I think what's missing in this is, at least for me, and I sort of imagine other people feel this way even if they don't recognize it, but I don't have beliefs, I have confidences.
I don't think it's possible for a person to not have beliefs.
Well, I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek. What I'm really saying is, I don't hold anything at 100%. It's just some things I'm quite confident about, some things I'm less confident, some things I'm even less confident.
So
when we talk about evidence,
would be absolute certainty, the idea that you could be 100% certain of anything. I for over 2 years held the position that there wasn't such thing as absolute certainty. So, I'm not going to criticize anybody for holding that position, but I think that there are 2 propositions that anyone could be absolutely certain of. But I think it's important to recognize that knowledge doesn't have to be absolute certainty, and beliefs don't have to be knowledge. There could be certain things that you believe, but maybe your threshold of justification isn't high enough for you to categorize it as a case of knowledge, right? And so I think that I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. It's just I think we're in agreement. Like, I see these pieces of evidence not as propping up in the sense of it either falls or it doesn't fall. They're all things that get me to go from 65 to 70%, and so if something falls, I don't go to 0, I go from 75 to 65.
Well, so I would agree with that, and the same thing that that William had just previously said about it not being really binary for most people, but I think that it does change with respect to the proposition that the person believes, because there are certain things that people have an emotional bias toward, and then some things that they don't, right? And so I think that basically we were talking about beliefs having, maybe 3 supporting blocks. I think it's important to remember that while that may be the case for some propositions that they believe in, there may very well also be ones that are supported by a single block, and that if you can get that single block to fall away, then you can get that upper belief to fall away too.
Yeah, one other thing I'd like to point out is, like, I think that there is a tendency I think human beings hold a wide range of views that are probably even contradictory, right? They hold models for things that aren't necessarily coherent in their own actions, but they become coherent in what they choose to do in the world. So I think what's not really as important is what level of confidence you have, because at the moment you have to choose whether to act or not act in the world in accordance with this belief, you have made a binary decision. So I think one of the things that's interesting is, for example, I consider myself an atheist, and I do that because I do not believe, or certainly do not act in the world in accordance with the idea that any one religion is true, or that gods exist. I do not act in the world under that belief. And even though intellectually I could say I can't know for sure that there is no God, I certainly do not act as if one exists. And to me, that's as a closer definition to believing something to be true as anything. So I don't think I usually talk about the difference between a truth and a de facto truth. I don't think we can know true things 100% true. We have all these kinds of philosophical jiggery pokery that we can create that essentially means that we can't really know much for sure, if indeed anything. But what we can do is we can act as if something is true. We can treat something as true. And so it's in treating something that is true that's actually really important to us.
In a sense, I feel like you're defining knowledge in such a way that it's like synonymous with certainty. Because, if you say that we can't know anything, to follow that up with for 100%, I think raises the importance of the point that you don't have to have 100% certainty of something in order to know it. And then I guess the question that raises is, what level of confidence or justification do you have for your belief to be a case of knowledge? And then above that, what does it take for it to be a case of certainty? Because I talked earlier about certainty, and I mentioned that I thought there were only two propositions you could be certain of. I think one is that you exist, and the other is that you're experiencing. Now, I don't think you could have absolute certainty that what you're experiencing exists, but so for example, like you could be in a dream or a brain in a vat or the victim of an evil demon, any of the skeptical scenarios, right? But what you cannot be wrong about is that you are experiencing having the conversation.
Shane, I knew you were going to go down this road, and I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently, and I really, really want to have this conversation, but I have a horrible feeling we will be here for a very long time if we do it. But
once you get into skeptical arguments in epistemology, it's hard to shut the fuck up. So,
I would like to just go back to the initial question. What kind of epistemology are we usually using when we're doing street epistemology? I think that is in the word street, and we are not, most people who are doing street epistemology are not consciously using a specific type of epistemology. It's mostly intuitive, and you can see that in the Tic Tac experiment. You use that as an example where it is a way of suggesting a certain epistemology to people that you're talking to. Yeah. And some people will reject that with respect to like their religious beliefs, for example.
Right.
But
part of the conversation. Just part of the conversation when you're having a talk with somebody is figuring out what they find to be reliable.
Yeah.
And I love that you keep using the word reliable, but if I explain why, I'm going to go on too long. So what are you going to say, William?
I just wanted to say, I think one thing that's really important is that the nature of when something is considered to be true, or whether somebody considers themselves to know something, or what somebody even considers to know, they know, I think is evaluated in context every time they think about it.
Right.
I think context is hugely important to when somebody will act in the world as if something is true or not. So I think people are constantly evaluating their confidence in relation to the risk reward in the moment when they have to choose to act on it.
I actually, there's a paper I should actually send you a link to about what's called the stake sensitivity of knowledge. And I'm what's called a contextualist. So I think that what it takes to have a case of knowledge is context sensitive to what is at stake as to whether or not you know it. So, if it's a matter of like what you had for breakfast this morning, what it takes for me to count that as a case of knowledge is going to be a much lower threshold for, does this medicine cure this illness that I have? If I have an illness, right? That's going to require a higher threshold to be a case of knowledge. So I think that whether or not you know something is sensitive to what's at stake upon acting upon that belief, that case of knowledge. So I would agree with what you're saying.
I really love that. There's a cool little thought experiment about if you leave an apartment, you go downstairs, you meet your friend for drinks, and you leave their apartment at the top of this story of flats, and you sort of go all the way down to the bottom, and your flatmate says to you, "Oh wait, did I lock the door?" And you're like, yeah. I'm pretty sure you locked the door, and you mean it in the moment. You're honestly representing what you're pretty confident, like enough to say, yeah, you locked the door. Yeah, you're cool. You later leave and you come back and you find out there's been a horrible murder or a robbery or something gone on, and the police are outside and they said, "Did you see him lock the door?" "Oh God, no, I can't. I'm not sure. I really don't know. I don't know if I locked the door." The context has shifted. All of a sudden, the stakes are very different. Now, all of a sudden, and in both times, you're not really lying. You're just representing.
Right. There's a different. What's at stake is different in each of these scenarios.
100%.
So what you require to count the same belief as a case of knowledge shifts, and then suddenly isn't justified enough for you to count it as a case of knowledge.
And here's something interesting: is I honestly think in reflecting on it with that, in the first instance, you're probably reinforcing your belief internally that they did lock the door. And so casually later on, if you were to be asked again without the concerning context, you would probably be more confident and say, yeah, he locked the door. I've already said that once. I'm pretty sure that's true. But in the concerned interrogation of your knowledge on this matter, you will massively decrease your confidence in saying later on, if asked, did you know that he locked the door? No, I really have no idea about whether he locked the door or not.
Right.
And you're not just changing how you're representing the view. I think you're actually altering your perception of that memory, that idea. And I think that I think
your
all
example
of this
is even similar to the one used in the paper about what I was referring to. So that's
awesome.
It's an awesome example.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. I don't know. It's certainly not mine. I don't know where I got it from, but in any case, I think it's I think all of these things I think are really interesting. But I think fundamentally, I think what it should breed in us is a certain amount of empathy when we're interacting with somebody and actually asking them to reflect on what they believe. Because the truth is, I think honestly, most of the time they don't really know what they believe. Like they haven't really thought about it. They've very rarely had a reason to articulate it, and certainly not try to justify it. And so I think it's super interesting it's super important though. We're empathetic to the fact that might be a difficult thing for them to address, and that doesn't mean they're necessarily being dishonest.
Right. And I want to address the question. It said, can you reasonably be a foundationalist and a contextualist? I think yes, because there's no contradiction between contextualism and foundationalism. So in epistemology, there might be various different areas that are binary. So you might have like, I'm pretty sure rationalism versus empiricism is binary. You might be a rationalist and a foundationalist.
I disagree with that claim.
You think between empiricism and rationalism?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like rational, logical arguments can provide evidence the same way that empiricism can provide evidence.
All right, get a room, you guys.
Well, that doesn't mean that those two aren't binary, though. That's just saying that.
I felt like you were saying that they're mutually exclusive.
No. So what I'm saying is, when I say that empiricism and rationalism are mutually exclusive, I'm not saying that you either have empirical senses or you have rationality. Like I would agree, like empiricists don't deny, that you use rationality to arrive at beliefs, and rationalists don't always deny that you use empirical senses. The difference in whether you're rationalist or empiricist really just comes down to what you think the foundation is. And for me, I think the foundation of one's epistemology is perception, and perception is via empirical senses. So I would be an empiricist, but I think I could come to a rational belief, but in doing so, I would be reasoning out through premises, and the premises I would have arrived at through my empirical senses.
Shane, you really make it. I know you and I are going to have an interesting conversation at some point in the future about cogito ergo sum, and we want to know. Yeah, but I feel like this is not the time for that.
I think we're going down a little rabbit hole.
We are.
But I which I find very fascinating. I dove into like the question of the different epistemologies in the past, and I want to quote part of a little essay that a German philosopher wrote about truth. It's just called "What is Truth?" and I'm going to quote it for the sole purpose of sounding smart. By the way, I translated that into English. And the quote is, "To reduce it to a simple formula, enlightenment is necessarily based on a pragmatic, hypothetical corresponding coherence theory of truth." All right. I think that's a good...
Makes perfect sense.
Wait, can you say that again?
I was going to say I was following that, actually. I suspect you were suspecting that we wouldn't.
What was the quote again, the last part?
Right. Enlightenment is necessarily based on a pragmatic, hypothetical corresponding coherence theory of truth.
Yeah, I think that's not bad, actually.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't even. Okay. I know some of those words. What does that mean?
Well, so the coherence.
I was
theory,
hoping for that reaction.
Yeah. The coherence theory of truth is there are various theories of truth, which is weird. But the coherence theory would be that what is true is what, or that would be. I'm thinking of the correspondence theory. Is that the same thing as the coherence theory? Those are different.
I was hoping that we could use that quote as a way to. I mean, yeah, because I think this is turning into just us nerding out about epistemology, and I don't know.
It's very academic.
Very academic.
Yeah. We're not street enough. That's the problem. We need to be more street.
Yeah. Street cred.
But nonetheless, Shane, that was thank you very much for joining us for this. It's been really fun chatting to you, and I genuinely hope we can catch up at some point in the future and have that conversation that we can't have here right now.
I'll leave some in the comments rather than in the chat, so they stay. I'll leave some comments to some papers regarding some of the things I was referring to. So
that's a great idea.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a great conversation.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks
Cheers.
for calling.
Be safe.
See you around.
Oh, we get that. Right. There's such a nice group of people that seem to join us. So we're gonna get one crazy racist, like drunken person or something at some point, right? I mean, it's gonna happen.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, I do.
Right. So just before we move on, let's maybe have a reset. So we're doing a call-in show. Shane was our guest. If you want to call and either explore a claim of your own, or maybe you have a question. There's been a lot of questions in chat. So if anyone wants to pull one onto the show, please click the link at the top of the pinned comment.
And let me add that if you think that all of your claims are lame or just too trivial, some of the greatest SE conversations I've had were about very trivial sounding claims, like the earth is round or water is wet. So
I've always wanted to explore a claim where it's like, I'm so confident that it's true.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share this real quick. This is quality questions. This is John's. We remember earlier in the show we were talking about how people introduce themselves, and this is how John he's got it down. Which is, I don't know if he wrote this from memory or just he's tuned this, but I like this. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, and what we believe. I'm asking people, what do you think is true? And I can ask the question, how do you know? I think that's a really good introduction, actually. Yeah. It's really short. It's really to the point, and it really talks about epistemology, what that is, gets that sort of Band-Aid ripped off really soon. I really like that. So, yeah, thanks, John.
The only thing that I would put on top of that is actually try to avoid using the word epistemology. I just say, I'm interested in how you came to your beliefs.
Sup, I do a thing called street.
There. I don't even say I do a thing. I don't even say I do a thing. I'm just interested in having conversations where I explore how you came to your belief. That's what I said.
But William, if you ever go out and do SE, you are going to have to try it that way. Just say, I'm doing a thing
I
called
do street.
Yeah.
There was a great Reddit post earlier this week about, it was a dialogue between like Socrates and Anthony Magna Bosco, and it was about street epistemology, and he gets held up at knife point, and it's kind of a ridiculous thing, but it was actually quite entertaining.
Is Anthony Magna Bosco getting fan fiction now? Is that what's happening? Is this the world we're in?
It's absolutely, it was philosophical fanfic with Anthony Magna Bosco and Socrates. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
how far away from erotic fiction? How far away are we from that? Do we think?
Depends
With any
what
group
you're
of people,
into.
it's an inevitable thing.
Depends what you're into. Yeah.
Indeed.
But
like
it was a horrible strawman of Anthony, though. So there's that.
I think it was just, it started as a play on street, and it was, a guy who's, I'm going to rob you, and so but I think it was more interesting than banal.
I feel it's definitely is interesting when people try to when people are mocking street epistemology and sort of using the caricature version of it. It's really noticeable. It's really obvious, I think, and I think that's quite interesting. How I think it's quite encouraging how coherent street epistemology is, so that when you see the sort of the knockoff version, the sort of straw man version of it, it becomes most apparent. It's very clear.
So we've got a couple questions in the chat. One from Peter. Should we start sequentially? Is the goal of SE to improve others' epistemology? If so, do they have an agreement on what a good epistemology is?
Yeah, so I have a very strong view about this, and my view is that the purpose of street epistemology is to encourage your interlocutor, your conversation partner, to honestly reflect on the reasons why they believe what they believe. That's the goal. It's to encourage honest reflection in the person you're speaking to. That's it. That's it. Drop mic, walk away. That's my very strong stance on what I believe street epistemology is.
Why would you want to do that?
Why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
I think it's probably... I find it quite an entertaining... Why would I want to do it personally, or why would I want somebody to reflect on what they believe? Do you mean? Sorry.
Yeah. Why is that? Is that a good thing to get someone to reflect on the reasons for...
Yeah, I think it is.
Why is it a good thing?
I think it's a good thing because it encourages people to notice when they have bad reasons for believing the things that they believe, and change, and when they believe things that are not based on held for good reasons, they are likely to believe things that are wrong or damaging or harmful, or could lead to wrong or damaging or harmful things. So
and harmful to themselves or other people,
or other people. Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to. Sorry, I just want to add one little thing. It's very much related to something we talked about last week, where street epistemology doesn't even have to be about beliefs. It can be about feelings and fears. You might think, you're in danger of getting bitten by a dog or something, and you could explore that belief. How dangerous do you think dogs are? How likely do you think you're going to get bitten if you go on a walk in the park today?
So, William, would it be fair to say that the goal is to decrease the risk of people doing dangerous things or harming themselves or others?
I think for me personally, I feel it's more about wanting other people to have better lives and feel better, and feel better is not necessarily true. Actually, it's not necessarily about feeling better. There may be something that is not true but makes you feel better. I still think it would be better for you not to believe, on the basis that allowing for that belief system might then open the door to you believing other things that might harm you. So I believe I believe human beings are better served if their mental models better map to reality.
So is that your goal, to hopefully get as many people as possible to have an accurate understanding of reality and have their beliefs map onto reality?
Better map onto reality. I would say so. Yeah.
Okay.
and that encouraging them to reflect. And I think that's a slightly more ambitious goal than the one you attempt to do in a single SE conversation, right? In a single SE conversation, you're just trying to help them reflect on why they believe what they believe. And I think that in doing so, that they're hopefully going to notice something interesting about their reasons, or even just through. I mean, one of the things we were talking about the other day, I did an interview with somebody and we were talking about this. Just the mere act of them articulating what it is that they're thinking is an incredibly useful thing. Just because most of the time, especially for these deeply held beliefs, we're sort of taught you're not supposed to talk about them. They're not to be discussed, and they're only usually discussed, therefore, with fellow members of the people that believe the same thing, and you get these little echo chambers.
Societally, there's something private about them.
Should be
private
protected
beliefs.
And exploring it with a stranger, I think, is quite an arresting experience for people.
What I've found really interesting, I don't remember who said it, but someone said it's that you have one part of your brain trying to explain to put your belief into words, then there is a different part of your brain listening to your just having the belief or putting it into words, and then listening to the interviewer repeating it back to you. That's another different part of your brain processing basically the same thing or the same idea, and that sometimes it can be enough for someone to go, oh, wait, hold on, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to change that. I'm gonna have to change the phrasing.
I think my favorite experience in any conversation I've had was repeating someone's words back to them verbatim, and then them going, "No."
What kind of fool would say that? It's not.
Now that I've heard it out loud, it's clearly not true.
One of the things that seems to keep occurring to me, or becoming a reoccurring theme, I guess, in some of the conversations I've been having recently on my channel, has been that it's often a remarkably small, like, not. There's a danger, I think, that people think of street epistemologists kind of like sophists, that we're there to use language and rhetoric to sort of sneakily sort of get people to believe certain things, and actually. It's kind of remarkable how simple the idea needs to be to have such a massively reforming effect on your worldview. And a great example of that is Lisa from Unruly Lucy, who was on the show a couple of days ago, or last week. I don't know, time is losing all meaning at the moment. She was describing how she was giving a talk to a bunch of Mormon young ladies because she was teaching them about the ways of Mormonism. And as a Mormon, and she simply asked the question, why are you here? And it was her contemplation of the answer that she's supposed to give in answer to that question, which is obviously to serve Mormonism in some way. And she said, why are you here? And she suddenly caught herself asking that question, and then realized that what she was about to say she didn't believe, and it was just that moment of self-awareness. There's an expression, I think it's the origin of the expression "a naked lunch," where you suddenly catch yourself, realize as if from an outsider's perspective, realizing what you're doing, and you suddenly take a moment. I think these sort of moments happen to us quite often, where we suddenly sort of see ourselves as if from a third person perspective, and sort of reflect on whether or not you want to be the person who just said that or did that action. I think it's remarkable. I hear this again and again with people when I talk to them. Sometimes it's just somehow just a simple question, or somebody notices something and then they can't not notice it anymore. It's really doesn't have to be very complex. In other words,
there's a lot of great.
That gives a little bit more depth to the saying, "How am I supposed to know what I think before I hear what I say?" So that makes a lot more sense now.
There's a lot of great stuff in chat. We're having a side discussion, but gorgeous Roddy Krem says, if you have a hidden agenda, then you are selling, in my humble opinion. So this is really interesting, and actually it's something Will and I were talking a little bit about offline. I think this is my claim, but I think all conversation is a form of manipulation.
Oh yes, I remember that. Yeah, that was an interesting one.
And I think this is kind of what Dada's trading room is echoing. Like, the reason why people have conversations, or maybe I didn't construct the sentence correctly. People have conversations because of reasons. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah. So if you have a hidden agenda, then you are selling, in my honest opinion. Interesting. I think so. I think when we were talking about that, I mentioned this idea of speech act theory, which is a theory of language, which suggests that all language is separated into two contingent components. One is the illocution, which is the words and the phrasing and how you choose to conduct yourself. It can also be non-phatic, as in how you conduct yourself, your body language, that kind of thing. And that's one part of language and communication, but the other is the perlocution, which is the change that you want to have happen in the world as a result of using language. If you didn't want there to be a change in the world, you wouldn't speak. You wouldn't say anything.
Right.
Like there's no purpose to it, right? There's no, and so
Right.
you want there to be a change in the world as a result of you saying something. And I think that I don't know if that's necessarily manipulation, more as just
it gets into words. I think John gets to the heart of it. The quality question says consensual manipulation, because there's an ethical, I think, right, what Roddy was sort of worried about is the ethical implications, and lots of people are worried about this stuff. But I think that's a side conversation from, do you want to have this conversation for motives? We're all motivated. That's why we do things. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's non-consensual.
Yeah. I think anybody speaking with that motive is probably going to be quite boring.
Just, why would they speak if you have no motive? There's literally no reason to speak.
It sort of slightly reminds me of the free will determinism argument, and you try to imagine what a person with true free will would look like, and they just obviously become totally incoherent and starts acting it almost entirely at random. I can imagine somebody speaking without motive or an agenda not being dissimilar from that in some ways.
Guys, you're contributing to this conversation through the chat already, so why not just call in and talk to us?
Yeah,
it's either that or we'll talk to you for another hour, and that's a threat, not a promise. But yeah, do Cancelo.
And Chucky and I may leave, and then you're stuck here with William.
Oh God, see, that would be non-consensual for sure.
God damn!
But yeah, to go
as a threat.
To rewind the conversation a little bit, like I think I'll admit to having plenty of reasons for having conversations with people. Like, I have conversations with friends and family because I care about them and I'm interested in their well-being. I have conversations with strangers because I think it's better if more people are reasonable and believe true things. And are slow to anger and thoughtful. I think these things help society and they help me, and that's why I have conversations.
Yeah, I think usually when people say manipulation, they usually mean some sort of hidden selfish agenda.
Yeah. I use the word to be spicy, but yeah, of course, but and accusing people doing street epistemology of trying to manipulate people, when they do that, there is this, usually people, when they hear that, they usually think of manipulation as they are doing this for their own selfish reasons, and which they're not revealing. And I think you can easily show that that's not, that you can't use SE for that. It's not a tool that you can use for that purpose, right? I don't know. The thing that drives me crazy is, when's the last time anyone has gotten consent to talk to their parents about the fact that they're racist or something like that? I just don't understand, why does consent why is there such a fear about street epistemology when people are having arguments every day?
So one of the things I've often said, and I think is apparent and feeds this narrative, by the way, is that the optic of street epistemology is identical to the optic of Mormons, Scientologists, Jehovah's Witnesses, people going out with a specific agenda. Now, how did the Scientologists use, they don't say, hey, we are collecting money for the Church of Scientology, give us your money, sign up here. They say, no, we're going to conduct a personality interview for you to help you manage your life better. And they ask you a few questions on the street, and supposedly, I've never gone through this experience, although I totally would love to. Supposedly, they would then, if you answer the questions sufficiently well, and then invite you sort of for an interview. And this is all being done under the rubric of helping understand you better, so that they can provide you some help, some support. People need help and support. Jehovah's Witnesses I see constantly on the streets of London with stands that say things like, we can help you with your mental health issues. We can help you with your feelings of anxiety or depression.
How many Christian missionaries, I use in quotes, are at AA meetings?
And this is not a whataboutism, right? This really isn't. This isn't a whataboutism. But what I fear is that we are sharing the same perception here, because the optic is so similar. Person with a clipboard in the street asking questions about what people believe. It is very difficult, I think, to escape the fact that almost any other time you encounter that situation, somebody really is pushing something, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's for you to sign up to a certain insurance scheme. It doesn't matter, but every other optic where that applies, it's sus.
And also just approaching people in the park and asking them, hey, do you have a few minutes for a couple of questions? That is the assumption. Oh, what are you trying to sell me? What do you want from me? Do you want my money? Do you want you have to have some sort of selfish motivation to do this.
To be totally fair, and this, you and I, Janosch, disagree. I have selfish motivations doing conversations.
Sure, yeah, I agree. Me too, because I'm trying to record it so that I can put it on my YouTube channel, and I want to spread the word about street epistemology and all of that. And also, I enjoy doing that. It's a hobby of mine, so it is selfish to a degree.
That's what I was going to say. I enjoy it, right? And I can't deny that I get something out of it, for sure.
Yeah, it's fun.
So to be even more insidious, right? Because YouTube is visual. My reasons for doing this, I want more people to be open-minded. I want to, if I could pick one little snippet, I don't think people should be at 100% on as many things as they're at 100% on.
You and I agree on this, but I wonder whether there is a problem with language, which is, and also if you remember back to the illocution perlocution thing, it rarely benefits you from saying something as representing your true opinion on something. If you're saying things to have an effect in the world, there is a tendency to say a slightly stronger version of what you actually think, right?
Which is why I said manipulation instead of motivation or something like that.
Effective speech could be seen as manipulation. Yeah. I guess that makes some sense. But in any case, I think there's also a language gets incredibly verbose if you start to try to caveat your rationalization process in every sentence. And so people don't, and people are used to speaking a certain way, which is by its very nature imprecise. And so when people describe themselves as 100% certain, what they're really saying is, I do act as if this is true. But what does 100% certain really mean? Does anybody get like a ding when they reach 100% certainty on something? Is there a way you can feel the 100% certainty?
So I took upon this thing where, and I think, this is something Anthony in his videos really tried all sorts of different things to explain the scale, but I settled on 100% means you cannot possibly be wrong about this. Are you sure you mean 100%?
Yeah, that's what I tried to do as well. I tried to say 100% is totally right, no questions, just 100% confidence.
Yeah.
It's just that it is suspicious. But then people feel there's a difference between what people feel and how they want to represent themselves, right? And so I don't think they ever feel 100%, but they want to represent their confidence. It's a measure of conviction more than it is.
It kind of goes both ways. I think sometimes they feel that they're at 100%.
Right. I'd recently asked someone, does that, when you say 100%, he said that he was a Christian and he was 100% certain that I don't know, the Christian God exists. And I said, does 100% mean that you cannot possibly be mistaken about this? And he said, yes, that's what it means. I cannot be mistaken about this. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It still doesn't mean that that's actually what he felt like. But still, that was a little bit surprising to me, because usually when you ask that, people will back down a little.
Often people will back off.
Yeah.
The reason why I think it's feelings, Will, is how many people will say, I'm at 110%. It's gusto, it's bluster, it's confidence.
That's exactly. You and I are in agreement here. That's what I think. Mostly, they're not saying what they really intellectually feel. They probably aren't even that aware of what they intellectually feel. What they're choosing to do is say, how should I represent myself in this moment? And this is kind of what Shane was addressing earlier as well. There's the sense of, what's the risk of this? What's the cost of this? Versus what's the cost of me saying less confidently, and is there just more benefit in me just representing this view as 100% confident? And mostly, if it's a faith thing, that by definition, you've got to be all in, right? You've got to want to believe it. You've got to make it work until it works, right? Or work it till it works, or something.
I mean, this is why this drives me crazy. We're talking about motivations. I feel like the difference between someone who's at 99% about their God belief and 100% is the difference between a fervent believer and a suicide bomber. It causes actions in the world. If you cannot be wrong, you're willing to do extreme things.
But again, do you mean that somebody honestly? If you're talking about,
I'm telling you, the people who blow themselves up aren't at 99%. That's the claim that I'm making.
I don't know that I would believe that, actually. I really don't know that I would believe that. I think all it has to be is more convincing than the alternative, and they need to be sufficiently motivated to believe that.
Right.
I don't believe it has to be 100%.
Yeah. And probably the circumstances, like what would happen if I said I'm not going to do it at this point? They've already prepared me. I already have the belt lying here. I already know the date and time. And my family already knows that they're going to get money from this organization after the fact.
I'm just thinking how uncharitably somebody's going to edit this later, and you're going to get a knock on the door.
Oops, yeah. Don't swat me, please.
By somebody, I meant me, obviously. But
whether I'm right or wrong, that's the topic of an SE conversation. But this is my position. I think people who are at 100% are fundamentally not being reasonable. And the only reasonable place to be is somewhere other than 100%.
I mean, but are you talking about how they represent themselves, or where they actually are? Because I don't think again, as we were discussing with Shane, I think how confident you are about something changes in the moment, in context, in your mood, in your emotional state, in based on present information. I think every time you need to act on the belief, I think you're kind of evaluating it to a certain extent. Or at least every time that belief is challenged, you're evaluating it, and your response to that will be contextual, hugely contextual. So I don't think a lot of believers will say that they're 100% there, but then they will say, of course I've doubted, I've had doubts, I've had crisis of faith, but now I'm back to 100%. I feel better now. It's like, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, even in the reported definition, even the reported output here, it's
I mean, there's certainly complexity in that people are afraid of saying they're at 99%, because to have doubts is itself bad.
If you're all in on your Pascal's wager, I mean, you might as well ride it to the end, right?
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I spoke to my grandfather, who is a preacher in his retirement. He for a Christian church, and he's at 100%. And I said, Pop, 100% means you can't be wrong. Are you really so confident that you can't can't even entertain the idea of being wrong. And he doubled down. I'm definitely at 100%.
But when people talk about confidences, I think there's like the common parlance of confidence is like more about how you carry yourself rather than a sort of a rational confidence, like a knowledge epistemological confidence. Would you agree? Like a confidence is like, oh, that person's very confident. Like they say it confidently.
I guess if what I'm hearing you say is that for a lot of people, there's a disconnect between what they're actually at and what they report to be at.
Yes.
I think for sure, but I think that disconnect.
I just said 100%.
I see such a disconnect in a very uncharitable light. I see such a disconnect as basically being evidence for. I haven't really thought about my belief much to know where I'm even at. And so I'm going to confidently, without good reason, say 100%.
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite like that, but I think that you can. It's like the policeman asking the question about the key, the locked door, right? It's like all the confidence in the world when your friend asks, but when the policeman asks and the stakes different, now all of a sudden the answer's completely the opposite answer that you gave previously, and yet you weren't necessarily lying the first time. You may have believed or sufficiently believed that in the context that no, the door was locked. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Is it a lie to say you're at 100% when you feel like 100%, but 5 minutes later you don't? I don't know.
The answer to the question is a very binary one. Did I lock the door? Yeah. You said yes. That's you've given it yes. You may have then implied that maybe you're not 100% confident by going yeah, rather than yes, you have definitely locked the door.
This goes back to your thing about language, and this is a technique that I have inserted or borrowed from SE into my normal life. Is you're having a conversation with somebody. Did you get milk when you went to the grocery store? Yeah. I got milk. How confident are you that you got milk? And
if you say it 3 times, it's not 3 times as confident. It's in fact the other
way. Yeah. It's and you find out I'm 80% confident. Okay, I mean that's like reasonable, right? I'm pretty sure I got milk, but honestly, I was on autopilot, so I may not have.
You can be 80% sure, but they're also 80% terrified of the alternative. Yeah, this is a great
motivated belief.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the problem. That's a huge factor, I think, especially with religious ideas, because there's part of it is that you have to report, you have to say you believe it, you have to externalize your faith, and I think that means that people are more likely to say 100% regardless of where they're at. Gorgeous Roddy Chrome, what a fantastic username. Are you 100% sure that you are 100% sure? Well, indeed.
Yeah.
When people say, when I say that I think certainty is not a position that anybody can hold, honestly, people always ask me if I'm certain about that, which is, I get it all the time, and the answer, of course, is no, I'm not certain about that, but it's what I presently believe.
Yeah, I don't say that. We're going back to this conversation earlier with what was his name? Nate? Shane. I don't like to use the word no. I try not to use the word no because there's all this philosophical disagreement about what it means to know something. I'm just more or less confident about things.
When people say they know it to be true, what they're really saying is, I'm really confident, and I want you to know. I want you to treat me as if I'm certain. That's what they're saying.
No.
I mean, I feel like there's, it makes sense to have a word for describing things that you're confident enough about to say, yeah, I know that. I know that.
I wish we didn't have a word for it, because it means that people don't have to think about how confident they are. They just use that word for everything.
And in some cases, you don't want to, and it makes sense not to have that conversation because, for example, did you, we're going to holiday, did you pack your swimsuit?
But I would say I think I did, but I'm not sure.
Well, sometimes when you say I think I did, imagine potential consequences of you being so unsure. Sometimes you just say, yes, I know I packed it. Well,
What are the
because
consequences?
because maybe you won't get in the car and leave. You will have to unpack everything and look in your suitcase and see if you actually packed it, even though you are 99.9% confident, because you just
I think this gets back to what Will was saying, though. Like, there's something about acting, and I feel like even that isn't quite knowledge, right? Because the way that I would look at packing a swimsuit to go on vacation is, I'm 99% sure I packed it. I remember packing it, so I probably packed it. And so I can act as if I packed it. I don't have to go recheck my bag. But in the case that I didn't pack it, I'm sure I could buy another swimsuit when we get there. You know, like but I tell you one thing, if it were a matter of life and death, right, I'd probably go and recheck it until I was at like 99.9, 99.99. You know what I mean?
So it
like,
used to
check your parachute cords 3 or 4 times.
It used to be that the word soon meant immediately. So in English, the word soon used to mean I will do something. If I would say I will do something soon, it meant I will do something immediately. I'm starting it now, is basically what soon meant. And then, of course, people got lazy. And so when people started to say to them, when are you going to go mow the lawn? And they would say, I'll do it soon. Nah, maybe that meant sometime in the next 5-10 minutes, right? And eventually, soon got further and further away. And so we created this new word, now. I'll do it now. And now, of course, you'll notice if you say I'll do something now, that kind of means in the next 5 to 10 minutes, right? And what we normally say if we're going to do it is we'll say we'll do it right now. I'm doing it right now. Except if you've noticed now, most time people say right now. That could be within the next 5. So there's
right this very instance.
Yes.
Yeah. What you're saying is people are really bad at procrastinating.
And that has an impact on the language. So I don't think I would love it to be true that there was no way to express 100% confidence in the language, but people need the hyperbole to be persuasive, to change the world in the way they want to do it.
This is another one for me. Want versus need. They want the hyperbole.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, maybe they need it. Maybe the problem isn't really with the person's intention to speak, but how the person's speech will be heard, right? Because for example, right now we're not really used to people caveating. You know, if you express uncertainty, that means, well, even a little bit nowadays. Yes. Well, maybe they aren't really telling the truth or know what they're talking about or certain about this. And sometimes it can really matter.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed
in industry. So I'm a programmer, and I've had so many conversations with other people with what do you call it? What do you call it when imposter syndrome? You're familiar with this phrase?
Yeah.
And you come into maybe a new company, you've got a new job, and you're worried that you don't know what you're talking about, that other people are more expert at this stuff than you. And you're afraid to ask a question because you're worried that it might signal ignorance and only serve to confirm this idea that you don't know as much as other people. And I think this is a real shame. And it goes back to this idea of like, I wish I could convey to people that uncertainty and, questioning and 99%ing and things like that should be valued.
Yeah. I was speaking. There's an interview going up very shortly with a lady I interviewed who was recently joined the street epistemology community, and she expressed that in her journey, she was a Christian as she grew up. She got to 18. She changed from a Christian. She became an atheist. She admittedly became a slightly ardent atheist, it turns out. But then she had a transformative experience at the age of 20, I think, and as a result, fell back into is probably an uncharitable language, but she returned to Christianity and became a very strong Christian, and then 2 years later recognized that no, she really just couldn't make it square, and she's become an atheist again. Now, in today's day and age, that sort of behavior is just not to be tolerated. You are nobody's ally. Everybody mistrusts you. This is just burning your social credit.
You're a flip-flopper.
Nobody's taking your bets in the Pascal wager betting office at this point, right? So no, what does this mean? And what it means is this person is trying to figure shit out, and he's doing it in real time, and that should be applauded. That should be genuinely recognized as like, goddamn. I mean, she's gotten to her position the hard way.
Peter says, in Christianity, faith is a virtue and doubt is a bad thing. It's a fundamental difference in worldview. I think absolutely. I grew up hearing from my father and grandfather about doubting Thomas and how much better it is to believe without evidence.
That is an excellent comment, Peter. That's you're absolutely right. The virtuizing of faith, believing something without evidence, which I can't. If that's not the definition of faith, I don't know what is. Then
there's certainly people who disagree with that, but
I'm sure. But I think the reality is I don't really mind what you believe. I just want you to have done your thinking on it. I want you to have made that journey. And too often we speak to people and ask them why they believe what they believe, and the reality is they've never really thought about it. They've just sort of fallen into it, just like they fell into the language that they happen to speak. It just happens to be the one their parents spoke and all the people around them speak, so they use the language. And of course that makes perfect sense, but when you're adopting philosophical worldviews, maybe less so. So yes, I think doubt should be applauded. I think uncertainty should be applauded, and the best answer to almost every question is I don't know.
In case it wasn't clear, right? When you're at a job and you're wondering, how come nobody's asking this question? Is it because everybody knows the answer? I'm so stupid. I shouldn't be here. I'm going to be fired. Like, they're all probably sitting there thinking the same fucking thing.
Except for maybe one or two people,
And like, here's the one of the, as I used to be an IT contractor, sat in many meetings, being paid extremely well for just being what I was told to be, which is the only sensible voice in the room. And the reason is that I was the only one that didn't give a shit about asking a stupid question. And so oftentimes when people would talk about things, everybody in the room would actually have no idea, or worse still, everybody would think they were all on the same page, but actually weren't. And I think that just being able to be free enough to ask the question, you've mentioned this twice in this conversation, and I do not understand in context what that means. Could you explain what that is? Actually, I'm not sure what that is. And you hear this time and time again. And incidentally, I just want to point this out as well. Street epistemology is actually, I think, quite a useful set of tools and an idea to take into the workplace. I really do think that there's a lot of space in businesses for street epistemology to apply. And the reason is that people in businesses tend to be very protective of their ideas. They tend to protect their departments, protect their ideas. They tend to make assertions, and they dislike being challenged on those assertions or told that they're wrong or disagreed with. But street epistemology, I think, can be actually quite an effective way of inquiring as to, in a way that makes it all feel like you're just asking questions because that's what you're doing, gently inquiring why have they gotten to this conclusion, and is there anything that they can notice about the reasons why they've gotten to the conclusion about whatever it is that the company is going to do. So I would definitely want to draw that to people's attentions if you've not already been doing it. Like, I think street epistemology can be very effective in business.
Maybe you should adapt that as your new nickname. The only reasonable voice in the room.
Honestly, I was a contractor for just over 10 years, and I've only recently stopped to join another company doing something different. But as a contractor, I was kind of nervous about entering that imposter syndrome sort of kicks in. And there was a piece of advice another contractor gave me, who says you just have to be a sensible voice in the room. Just be a sensible person, because everybody else has so many sort of different motivations that are defining how they act and what they say. You as long as you're free from that and you're able to ask the reasonable question, you'll look like a superhero. And it's totally true.
Chucky, you put in the chat that maybe we could explore with a caller. Maybe I'll put the comment there. The claim for faith is a virtue, or the opposite, faith is not a virtue. Because now I'm feeling increasingly bad, suggesting that maybe we could stop talking about, like, stop going down the rabbit hole of epistemology, because that so far this has been our Shane was our only caller in this show so far. So it would be great if someone
Yeah, there's so much conversation in the chat, but
right.
It seems like nobody wants to talk to us. What?
And Shane almost didn't come on because he thought maybe this isn't really that interesting or not what we want to talk about. So just go ahead and don't be
one thing perhaps
shy
to add is
talk.
Oh, I think my internet's playing up again. But one thing to add is that if you don't want to be on video, you can join just voice only. So if you're not comfortable putting your webcam on, I don't think that should be a barrier. And in fact, if you'd like any of us to turn our web cameras off because you think it would improve things, I would totally understand.
I
just to be clear,
I didn't want you to make these suggestions about my face in this. Okay.
Just to be clear, if you call in with a claim, it's not going to be 3 against 1. It's just going to be, you'll just be talking to one person. So the Woozle effect has a really nice comment. I think there's an interesting subtext here, even within SE. We have a lot of people who think they're on the same page, but there are some fundamental differences in agenda. Like, I think this, to me, this is the reason why I think SE and conversations and talking is important, because we're all living in these little siloed meat popsicle bodies. And we all think we know how the rest of the world works. We think we know how other people work. We think we know how they think. But you can't figure any of that out or test your beliefs or check it unless you talk to people. I just feel like talking with people is so important.
Such a good point. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to call this out because, like, I think that we should double underline this to make it super clear. Like, so the Woozle effect says, I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as SE is a method and not an epistemology of its own. Yeah, SE is not an epistemology. Like,
yeah,
I don't. There's no space for it to be. This is how you should think. It's just an inquiry on how you do think. Right, that's all it is.
Yeah, but, I mean, sometimes you'll talk to somebody and they'll decide and be happy and be comfortable. Let's say with faith, and they say, yes, faith is a reliable way to come to knowledge, and maybe that's where the conversation ends and they understand their belief better. I think that's a perfectly positive outcome for a talk.
Right. But I wanted to comment on what you just said there. I think many people see SE as a tool to talk about things that we disagree upon. When there's tension, when usually it turns into a heated debate or a fight, we can use SE to calm it down and to have a more friendly exchange. However, I believe that is overlooking the potential for having conversations about things that we strongly agree on. And I feel like that is sometimes even the greater danger, that you think you're all on the same page, like you just said. You think we all agree on the conclusion, but maybe we have vastly different reasons why we arrive at that conclusion. And by talking about them, maybe we discover, oh, maybe there is something to the opposite position, or at least there are some good points that they have. So and that is why I think there is a lot of value in using SE to talk about things that almost seem trivial or banal to us, like the earth is round, water is wet. What do you mean by that?
I think the banality of a claim sometimes makes it a little bit difficult because it becomes hard to interrogate honestly anyway, because you don't really have a reason for believing it. It's just, so foundational that you sort of you kind of have never really built that structure, which is still not entirely worth disregarding. But I really want to agree with there is a tremendous amount of value in exploring a claim about which you agree, because not only is it the case that you might not actually agree for the same reasons, and it might be important to identify that, but also you really want people to be more confident in things that are true, right? And that what you might not realize is that maybe the person that you're agreeing with, maybe they believe the the same thing as you, but maybe they've got a really poor epistemology holding that belief up, right? And that if that's the case, then they're susceptible to being persuaded by a poor argument from the other side. So so what you want to do is you want to make sure that people hold whatever beliefs they have for good reasons, and that if there are good reasons to be found, then they should be explored together.
I think this came up last week, but like if somebody's an atheist because they're angry at their life or something like that, I think, right, that's not a great reason to be an atheist.
Or angry at God.
Yeah, I mean that's a really bad reason to be an atheist. Yeah.
And I could see an effective and positive conversation with somebody leaves them more confident in a view that I don't agree with. Like I think that's possibly a valid outcome.
Yeah. I think that's basically what Luz was saying.
Oh yeah.
And I totally. So I had a conversation with my cousin that started about vaccine hesitancy, and I'm listening, right? I'm listening to her, what she has to say. I'm not making claims. I'm asking questions, and like I learn all this stuff about things she's dealing with in her life, and I come to understand her better at the end of that conversation. All right, we've got a caller.
We do.
All right, finally, gorgeous Roddy Chrome's calling in.
So I've clicked the add to stream button, and last time this nearly killed my internet connection for some reason. I've clicked add to stream twice now, and it's still not doing it.
So I did see him come up, and then I saw him go away. Now I see him come up again.
I clicked add to stream again. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I've never done this before, so I'm trying to figure out.
We can hear you, gorgeous.
Oh. Are you able to hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Yes.
It seems like Will cannot.
Okay.
Well,
I think I had to shut off my YouTube feed in order to get the StreamYard to work, and I can't see anyone now, but I can hear you, so I think that's fine.
Okay. Well, welcome. Do you have a question or a claim you want to explore?
Well, maybe a comment that'll turn into a question. I'm trying to learn SE. I've been watching Anthony Magnavosco's channel for about a year, and I've just discovered other channels like this one and so forth. My interest in it is related to how to talk to people that are very involved in groupthink. And my understanding is that whenever the word groupthink is used, it's usually a pejorative. It usually has, it commonly has the connotation that a person involved in groupthink can't think on their own, or they're brainwashed, or, these types of things. And it's especially used that way when referring to, say, religious groups. Some that you've mentioned are like Mormon and Scientologist and Jehovah's Witnesses. The thing that I'm still trying to understand is that I don't necessarily see all groupthink as bad as much as I see it as something that we have evolved to as part of our human.
Can you give us a concrete example?
Pardon me? What did you say?
Can you give us a concrete example of like a kind of groupthink that you think is good, just so that we know where you're coming from?
To try to think one that's good. I think, let's see. I can't off the top of my head think of a specific example, but let me describe it this way. We accept things and think things that we haven't often, say, really researched and put critical thinking skills to. We just sort of accept those things because whatever group we're in is that way. Okay. Here's one. As a former pro musician, there was always this, at least in the circles that I was in as a guitarist, there was always this idea that that Yamaha guitars were for beginners, or home players and not for someone on a stage.
Right.
And in all my years of playing in bar bands, I never met a single person who would ever play a Yamaha guitar. I started doing luthier work and came to realize that Yamaha makes absolutely phenomenal guitars that are right up there with Gibson or Fender or whatever. They just don't have the name brand recognition, and they don't seem to break through that, at least in the rock and roll musician groups in America. So that was because of a groupthink. If you analyze them, they're fantastic. So there's this groupthink there. Now, I don't know that that's a positive thing, but it just is a groupthink thing. And so the only positive thing might be about that is if you got up on stage and were playing a Yamaha guitar, that other musicians might look askance at you and think, what's that guy doing? So there's this social acceptance that a need of social acceptance that you fill by not using a Yamaha guitar on stage. Now, that may seem to be a strange example to people that aren't musicians, but the point is that it can be pretty. It can be groupthink can be pretty bad when you are in. Well, pretty bad from my perspective. If you're a flat earther, most of what you believe isn't because you actually have correct scientific analysis. It's because it's your group. And I'm wondering how, with SE, how you go through and
identify that.
Combat that a little bit more than just someone who's has a superstition or has never thought about something.
Yeah.
First of all, can I call you Roddy? Otherwise, I have to call you Georges, and then my wife might get involved. So, Roddy, thank you for that. It's a good question. My name, yeah. Gotcha. And so I think the first thing that is to say here is that I think street epistemology in general speaks to individuals.
Yes.
And I think it may well be, and you do hear this often, and I think if you do street epistemology long enough, you will notice that you'll get canned responses from people, and you can sort of get a sense that you're getting a canned response. It's not something that they've thought, it's the learned response. It's the kind of, when asked this, you give this response type behavior.
Everybody knows Yamahas suck.
Right, yes, because they do.
Right.
Have you ever owned a Yamaha guitar? Have you ever played one? Do you know anybody that's had one? Did you, and so now all of a sudden you as the street epistemologist need to ask people questions to explain why they believe that. How have they gotten to this conclusion? So it's okay to repeat it as a talking point. Okay, we've heard your talking point, the group identity clarifier that you agree that Yamahas are terrible guitars. But then the question is, why do you believe that? And you'll be surprised how you don't have to go very far deep to just take one step beyond the canned talking points.
Well, I think the problem here is the discrepancy is the different goals of you believing that Yamaha guitars are good or bad. Because one is, if you want to belong to a group, it can be very beneficial to simply agree with everyone that Yamaha guitars are terrible, because that way you won't be looked at as like the weird guy who believes nonsense.
Exactly.
And our biological evolution had to accommodate for many factors that played a role in our survival, while we are focusing on good epistemology. And good epistemology is not always the most, or not, certainly not the only, and in many cases probably not even the most important factor to survival. Because if your entire group, your entire tribe agrees on a certain non-truth and an untrue thing, then it can be beneficial to simply agree with them and not care about whether or not it's actually true.
I think this almost gets into psychology. Like it may very well be that you sit down and you have a conversation with someone and they say, you know, you say, why do you hold this belief? And they say, because it makes me feel good. And then you have to say, well, is it important for you to believe true things, or does this belief bring you comfort even if it were mistaken? Would you still want to continue believing it? Like, these are important questions to ask people about any topic, I think. And maybe their answer, like maybe this is a good example of something where there's no moral quandary in letting them continue to believe this for their own, let's say, social reasons.
But there's a difference between how you choose to act and what you believe, right? So I think we might recognize a distinction between, hey, it's beneficial making the joke that drummers, how do you know there's a drummer at your door? Well, he doesn't come in when you ask him to, that kind of thing. You're going to win points all day making those kinds of jokes, right? But then that doesn't necessarily have to correlate with an earnest belief that drummers are really bad at timing, right? So
Yeah,
I think we can differentiate those things. One of the things that I think is the most concerning component of what you're describing, Rudy. Sorry, is it Rudy or Roddy?
Roddy.
Roddy, my apologies, Roddy.
That's okay.
One of the most concerning aspects of what you're describing, I think, is when you're talking to somebody and they're representing their tribe, their group, their view, and that the moment they start to question or they start to get into territory where they're not able to rely upon the sort of standard talking points, and that you're starting to actually ask them questions that they don't have pre-canned responses for, that rather than recognize that maybe there aren't necessarily strong reasons for believing what they believe, which is what you would hope they would do, what they actually do is start to feel like they're letting down their tribe, that they are just a poor ambassador for what is obviously actually true. They're not really questioning the truth of it. What they're questioning is their ability to defend the position. And I think that's the most concerning version, I think, of what you're describing.
It's fantastic when you can ask somebody a question. You say, why did you do that? Or why do you think that? And instead of making up something, they say, not for any good reason.
Or
I think that's
I don't know.
Beautifully
thought about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully honest, and like that's the kind of attitude that I feel like leads people to be better people.
Have you guys encountered this thing that I've described where people feel that they're not wrong, they're just not representing their side correctly?
Oh yeah.
And I find that very difficult to address, and I would be interested if anybody's had any thoughts on how that could happen, because it almost feels like by making that move, that their group or their identity cannot be compromised, and that therefore street epistemology, who can only ask the individual questions, the more you're making them question, the more upset they are getting with themselves that they're not doing a better job representing the view. You never really get to talk to the person in this sense, and I find that really alarming when people
talking to a mouthpiece for an organization.
But they're not even. They're usually enthusiastic as well at the beginning, because they think, oh, this is going to be very good for me. I'm going to be able to tell them all the things that were convincing, and then they realize they've forgotten them or half remembering them, or they can't really remember what was so persuasive to them at the time. But what they're not doing is thinking, I might be wrong about this. What they're thinking is, I'm letting this side down. And I think it's almost a kryptonite to the SE method.
Well, if we could go back to Roddy's original statement, Roddy, are you saying that these people who believe this and then they belong to a group because of it, that is a good thing because it contributes to their satisfaction in life? Or I'm not sure I really understood the...
Well, thanks for asking that. So I clarify. I think that some aspects of groupthink are probably innocuous, other than it allows you to be seen and accepted in a group. what I mean by that, if I were to use the Yamaha guitar example, I have sat down with some guitarists and said, hey, take a look at this high-end Yamaha that I have, which by the way, I would never play on stage. And they play it and they go, oh man, this thing is unbelievable. And they like it and they look at it. This is great. But it's not something Slash is going to play on stage. And so, and this is within genres of music, this is actually true. There are certain brands, for example, if you're a metal musician, you will play a certain brand. If you're a bluegrass player, you will never play an electric Schecter on stage. And so the thing is that's innocuous. It really doesn't matter, other than you make choices to sort of meld in the group. And truthfully, it doesn't matter which brand you play. But in religion, it may be different, because Jehovah's Witnesses are a good example, because I'm a former Jehovah's Witness myself. It's been years, but I was a Jehovah's Witness back when they didn't have the carts and all that stuff, and you actually went on the street and actually tried to get involved in conversations with people. And there were things that were taught, and you might question them, but you would never say that out loud, nor would you ever. And you would also teach the sort of party line to other people. Now, there's a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses online that say it's a mind control cult and that they're brainwashed and everything. And usually those people were born and raised in it and had a horrible, teenage years and childhood. I joined as an adult, and I joined for theological reasons, which I no longer hold. But the point is that there were things that I would talk about and I wouldn't mention, and it wasn't because I was afraid. It was because I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to upset all of the people that I really loved, all my family and friends and everything else. And so breaking through to people about their beliefs, I think, can often be far more difficult than getting them to reason on the point. And this is what I think what I'm trying to say here without going on a tangent. And this is something that I want to figure out how to incorporate SE techniques into, because often when a person gives you the individual reasons, it's what they're thinking of at that moment and not necessarily the reasons why they act upon something in their daily life.
Yeah.
Does that make sense the way I described that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that occurs to me though is like it never ceases to alarm me how much I think the social engineering components of a lot of religious organizations are very deliberate.
Oh, yes, they are. Yeah.
And Jehovah's Witnesses are one of those sort of groups that use the term, I'm sure you may have heard of it, love bombing, which is the idea that you make somebody feel so overwhelmingly welcome, so overwhelmingly supported, and that they just can't help but feel like they've finally found their home and their sort of support group and their tribe, essentially. There's all kinds of carefully worked out methodologies to make it easy for you to agree with the policies and hard to question them. And so I would wonder whether or not some of this sort of in-group sort of groupthink that you're describing that sort of ends up happening, I think it's possibly more deliberate, or certainly can be more deliberate than perhaps you realize. And so yeah, but it's an interesting component of it.
I think that I would like to make a quick comment about that, because you brought up an excellent point there. And I can tell you, from having been in that group for decades, having raised a family in that group, having brought many people into the group, including my siblings and whatever, and now we're all out, I can tell you that lots of those behaviors were never taught. They were imitative. And there are, if you kind of study cults, there are some cults. The Moonies were the most famous. Stephen Hassan was a former Moonie, and he was a recruiter high up, and they would teach their members to love bomb. It was like, this is what you do. No Jehovah's Witnesses ever taught that. You just get part of the group, and then when someone who you've never seen comes into your church, they call them halls, comes into your church, you just get up and you talk to them and you introduce yourself and so forth. And so the point is that from an outsider's view, it can often seem like those things were pre-designed and even taught. But before being a Jehovah's Witness, having been a born-again Baptist and a fundamentalist, every church I went to did that. Literally every church I went to, when I went in, if I went to visit a Catholic church, see what they were like, there were people that would come around me. And so the thing is that a lot of times what people are doing is just an imitative behavior. And then when you ask them, what is your thoughts and whatever, they will come up with reasons to back it up. And
yeah, I think and it goes back to your core question. How do you talk to these people? One of the things.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have to be willing to spend a little bit of social capital and say, hey, so I heard you list a couple of reasons. Would you still be as confident if you found out those reasons were not as airtight as you think they are, or which one of these is the strongest? If things like that, because you may very well find out that even if they didn't have reason A, B, and C, they'd still be at 100%.
Oh yeah.
And so if you go through that, you can just say, okay, well, great. We don't need to talk about A, B, and C. Let's find out what would actually move you down the scale.
And do not use the term groupthink when describing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
okay, well,
but great question, Roddy.
I'm going to sign off. I appreciate you letting me on, and I appreciate
your input. Thanks so much for calling.
It's a great question, Roddy, and thank you for being part of the chat as well. We've seen your messages. It's been great having you here. Hopefully, we'll see you again another time.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye, guys.
Goodbye.
Take care, Roddy.
So I think that's probably about us for time, and the SE practice is just about to start over on the SE Discord server. So if anybody wants to participate in that, please feel free to head over there. But yeah, I think we're done today, chaps. Any last words for everybody? Anybody want to say like, comment, and subscribe? Because I'm not going to. Oh, I did it, didn't I? But that was my sneaky way of doing it without doing it.
Yeah, so. No one said that, but I'll remind people that anyone here now, maybe you didn't hear it at the beginning, anyone who speaks German and wants to participate in our German SE practice group tomorrow. Well, it's today now in German time. Sunday, 8 p.m. German time. Feel free to join us. This Sunday, we will have Anthony Magnabosco joining us. We will be able to talk to him a little bit. Yeah.
Awesome. So for me, I just want to say a really big thank you to everybody that's been watching, everybody that chatted in the chat thread. I can see it's been a lively conversation. Sorry if we've missed half of that, but obviously it's a bit tricky giving all the banter and also reading, but yeah, there's been some really good chat today, so appreciate that. And I think, as far as I can tell, we're going to be doing these call-in shows on a weekly basis. So tune in, same bat time, same bat channel next week, and we'll be there. So thanks a lot, everybody, and goodbye.
Take care.
See you next week.